Welcome to the channel and to today's drawing session. We will be creating a piece of Zentangle art today, so I hope that you've got the supplies that you need there, a pencil, pen, and a piece of paper. I'm using a Zentangle tile, but you can use any form of paper that you've got there. And let's jump right into the drawing. We'll start by creating an X on our paper. From corner to corner, I'm just going to draw a basic line that will serve as a guide for where we place items on the page and gives us a clue when we're reaching the center or approximate center and so on. So once we have that X down, we'll turn the tile so that we're looking at one of our lines here vertically, and we'll begin to place the elements on this piece of paper. So we'll start with going up about an inch or so from the corner, and we're going to draw a fairly large shape of a leaf, which is known as the flux pattern. And as always, I will be placing the names and the creators of the step outs for these patterns in the description box. Now, once I've created this large flux shape, we're going to start at the bottom at the same point. We're going to move outward here and draw a Mooka shape. We're just going to connect it right to the edge, make our circle here, and then follow that original line back to its origin point. And now we're going to do the same thing, but flipping it. So we're going to put the flux or the leaf shape on this side. And the Mooka shape will come out around this way. And now we want to start down here near this bottom again. And we're going to draw upwards in this direction. We're going to create what's known as a fescue shape, but we're going to actually turn it into a different tangle, but we're just going to start with that basic shape if you're familiar with it. So right about where that point is, just bring this up and curve it down just a little bit, and then make our darkened end on that. And we'll do the same in this direction. Now with those two in place, we're going to draw some additional lines here. We're going to start at the line. We're going to come up and follow it around, but we're not going to go all the way back to the origin. We're going to stop about here. So just watch what I do with this. Bringing that up. Stop. Then we'll go out and bring that down. And we repeat this process, bringing these lines around until we get our shape completed right down like that. So again, on this other side, we bring it up, around, and we stop. Then we just take our pen and draw a little swoop outward and bring it back in. And we're repeating this several times until we can meet that line down there and create our shape. Looks kind of like a pair of wings or something. I'm just rounding a little bit down there. Now we can start to do a little additional embellishments on these pieces we've already drawn as we fill in some details. So let's create a line down the center of our flux shape, and as you get to the end, just curve it downwards slightly to give the impression of a shape to that. And we'll do the same here on this one. Just like that. And now what we want to do is in this top portion of each flux shape, we want to create some Printemps shapes, or the little springs or spirals. So I'm just going to make these, and we don't need to put these in a particular pattern, but we want to create some interest by altering where they go so they're not in like a line or something like that. And we can also draw them behind so that they can fill a bigger space and cause some overlap and things like that. So I'm just going to draw a few of those in here. And you don't have to fill the entire area because we'll do some inking here, but you want to put in a few where you think they should go. And once you have those few in there, let's go ahead and ink around them just with the black ink and fill in the remainder of those spaces. Any space not taken up by your Printemps or spring shapes, you're going to just fill in. All right, now we'll do the same thing here to the top portion of this one. Same shape, same idea, but you don't have to perfectly imitate the pattern that you just drew. You can just put things wherever you'd like and fill or mostly fill this area with these little shapes. Or if you have a different shape you want to use, you could do that as well. I'm just purposely leaving some gaps so that I can create contrast in the drawing by adding some of this darkness here. Okay, so we've got those basic pieces in place. So now let's add a little bit of details to our Mooka area here. We're going to add some roundings up in the top part here, or in the neck of the design where the orb meets the stem. And we'll also add just a little bit of rounding down here in the bottom corner. And if you remember, I'll zoom in here on this next one. Roundings are simply adding little bits of ink or weight to an existing line or intersection. You can really add them just about anywhere in a Zentangle drawing, anywhere you think it needs to have that connective piece or a little additional contrast. But once we've added those, oops, you can really see that one in the camera here. Let's fix that a little bit. There we go. So we're just adding a little bit of weight to each of these shapes. And now that we've done that, we're going to add some lines that follow the curve here of our shape in general. Now, you could start at the bottom and work your way up, or you can start at the top and follow that curve around that way. I'm going to start at the top because I want to have a larger curve to work with. So let me zoom back out here. So you'll see here what I'm doing. I'm giving myself some space, and we'll just create an aura. And remember, an aura is a line that follows an existing line, so it goes parallel to it. And I'm just going to bring that around just like that. And now I'll do the same and continue this and just fill in this area. Just like that. And now I'm going to add a little bit of weighting to the end of these lines just by adding a little, let's zoom in again here, a little line that creates like a little triangle, and then just inking that in. So I'm just going off the angle of that existing line and then just filling in that little space that I've created. It just adds a little bit of weight and visual interest here to this end of these lines. And you can alter, as I did, which side you draw that line on if you need to be able to have space to do it. It just creates a little bit of a design going through there. Sorry, I keep drifting off the camera there. So we'll do the same thing here on this one. I'm going to just create those aura lines. Following that pattern, just continue those around. And then we'll add the weighting to these lines. Now we want to add a few embellishments here in these little crevices. So I'm going to add some smaller flux shapes than what we initially started with, these larger ones. I'm just going to add a few small ones in here that will also be embellished with some orbs. So I'm just adding the flux shape, kind of a standardized little Zentangle piece or pattern. It's used a lot in the Zentangle method, and I think it's a good little filler piece to use. So once we've done this, you can just draw a few leaves wherever you think they should go. We're just adding some additional details to the drawing is all. And then I'm going to add a few orbs just to fill in other areas here that might benefit from a little bit of additional detail. Just kind of piling them in there. Really no rhyme or reason to it other than filling space. And I'm going to do the same thing over here on this side. And you don't have to mirror the same shape that you did on the other side, but it's the same idea. Orbs and little leaf shapes. It's kind of piling them in there. And we can do the same up top here if we'd like. Now, once we have that, we want to come back down to this area and let's do some additional details here. So here, what I'd like to do is create little shapes that they follow the pattern of the outside edges, but they're just going to be jagged little pieces that have no rhyme or reason to their shape. You just make these shapes up as you go, but you want them to look like pieces of broken glass or some irregular triangles and other kinds of geometric patterns that we can come up with here. And just kind of fill in this space. When you hit this halfway point on our paper there, kind of pause and we'll come back to that in a moment. But just follow these pieces around and fill this area in however you'd like with different little shapes that just fill in this area. There are some Zentangle patterns. There's one that comes to mind called Tripoli, I believe it is, where you just draw triangles in intersecting ways like this. But here we're just doing random shapes, little prismatic shapes or shards of glass or strange rectangles, whatever comes to your mind, but just fill in the pieces down here. It doesn't have to be completely perfectly filled, but we just do want to have that sense of patterns down in here. And we'll get that all filled, and we'll do the same on this other side. And just have fun with the pieces that go in here. They don't have to be anything other than what you make them to be, but we're just filling in space. All right, so now up here where I said to pause for a moment, what I want to do is continue the same pattern. We're going to go outward up into this area, and we want it to make it look like these pieces are kind of exploding out of this area. If you can think of that way, I know that may seem strange, but just make it as though this Zentangle piece had glass in it and we dropped it on the floor and it kind of shattered and exploded outward. So we want to create a few shards that illustrate that or that show these pieces going outward. You don't have to do tons of them, but just get a few pieces coming out that way. And we'll do the same to the other side. We can now start to ink in, and we want to fill with black ink all the spaces between our shapes. But when we get up here, again, pause when you get to that halfway spot, and I'll kind of show you what we're going to do a little bit differently there. But for now, we can just concentrate on inking in these entire areas between our little shards of glass, so to speak. Now, as I said, we'll stop here as we get to that halfway point where our pencil line is, and we'll color this last area together. Now that we have both sides inked in up to that edge, the only thing we're going to do different here is nothing magical about it, but we don't want to just continue solid inking all the way out here because it'll just look awkward the way these pieces are. So what we'll do is we'll ink solid for a little ways, and then we'll start creating little hatch marks, or lines that can go outward, showing the continuation of this whole area, so to speak. And I'll show you what I mean. I drew a simple guideline for myself, and I'm going to ink solid right up to that. I'm using such a fine point pen that it's a little slow in the inking process, but it allows me to be more precise. So once I have this coming outwards a little bit like this, in fact, I might bring this up over that orb just to give us a little easier way to work with that. Now I'm going to kind of just draw these marks going outward that will still contain some contrast for us, but I'm just making it almost like it's exploding or shattering. And where you think you need to add a little extra ink, you can go ahead and do that. This just takes a little practice. There's nothing magical about it, and you just do it by eye. There's no rule about how these kind of things should look, but we just want to give that impression of that outward movement. And that's how we can create it here in this case, inking in where the pieces are connected and then just flicking our pens outward to get that effect. And I inked in around that other piece there a little more just because I wanted it to be darker. To be able to fill in behind it a little bit. And if you accidentally go through one of your little shard pieces, don't worry about it. Can look like a force line of energy or something coming out from it. It's just an unusual effect, but it's a way to make something different with our Zentangle drawing here to give it some energy, a sense of movement, and it's just a fun way to try something different. So here I'm going to create my area that I'm going to ink solid on the other side, and then I'll start doing those hatching lines going outward again. You may or may not like that effect or that unique detail with your Zentangle art, and that's up to you. But it's just something, another technique that we can pull from other drawing practices and use it to enhance our Zentangle piece. You might say, well, that looks like some hair growing out of there. Well, that's fine. It may look like that. You may have that impression as you glance at this piece. It could look like little furs or fur hairs or weeds growing out of there or something. But with our other pieces there, it gives kind of that effect maybe of something escaping or shattering there. Just a way to enhance some of those details. Now let's add a little bit of shading to our drawing. So this one's pretty easy to shade based on sort of standardized Zentangle practices. We can add some graphite here in the base of our little flux shapes so that when we blend that, it gives them a little sense of form and value differences, which are nice. So just adding some down in the base of the flux leaves, which will blend. And then I'm going to also add a little bit of graphite around the outside edge here to help maybe give this a more sense of form. And I'm going to add a little graphite around the edges of that other half of the shape to accentuate some depth maybe that will show like these Printemps pieces are sunken down in there. At least that's the goal, to just see if we can create that effect. And if you want, you could add graphite to your overlapping patterns if you have any, but they're so small that it might get lost and just become a dark area. So it's up to you whether you would find on your drawing that that's a suitable way to shade it. But I'm just adding around along the edge there just to highlight some of that depth, and then I'm also adding around the outer edge so I can create a little bit of a roundness shadow or value shadow there. All right, and we could do the same kind of idea on our Mooka shapes, like we often do to give them a sense of roundness. We'll make a little C, letter C is what I mean here, and then we can just round that with our tortillon. And we could probably add some graphite to these edges as well, now that I think of it, and we can give more of a sense there of roundness and maybe to the outside a little bit also. It'll just give some more dimension, I think, to this piece. Now these on these outer areas here, you could add just a little bit, kind of like you do with rounding with a pen, except we're going to add a little graphite rounding up in these corners. And then when we blend it outward, it will give some shape to these pieces as well. So I just call it a graphite rounding here up in the tips of these extra pieces. These little wings, if you will. And I just lay down just enough where when I blend it with my paper stump that it'll add some shape to that. We could also add just a little bit here, maybe around these ends, so that when we blend that, it gives a sense of shape there also. So now we've got that, and before we do the rest of it, let's go ahead and blend this out and see kind of what we get. Now, the other thing that we might do to help add some lift to this, I'm going to zoom way out, is if we added a bit of a shadow around the outside, it might help give that some dimension. And then I think I'm going to do the same around here. I think that we've got an interesting little piece here. It's not earth shattering, ha ha ha, since we have shattered pieces there, but I think it is a fun drawing that has a unique look to it. Now, we can, of course, sign this, put our chop on there, so I will do that. Put mine down here in the base. And with that, we can call this project or this drawing completed. So, as always, thank you very much for joining with me today. I hope you had fun drawing along with me, and I look forward to seeing everyone again real soon back here in the Tangles and Tunes channel. Until then, take care. Bye bye now.